The Collector's Compass is presented by All Touch Case, a premium display and protection solution designed to showcase your cards while keeping them safe. At Collectors MD, we encourage our community to collect with intention. That means displaying your cards how you want to, not how the hobby tells you have to. That's where All Touch stands out. Their magnetic hard cases use specially engineered magnets that protect your cards while allowing you to stack and link them for clean organization and unique displays. It gives you real control over how your collection looks and feels. The cases are built with a durable polycarbonate shell and a soft internal cavity, so your cards stay protected without sacrificing presentation. Whether you're working with paper, chrome, autos, or thicker patch cards, they offer sizes that fit your collection. At the end of the day, it's about protecting what you've built and displaying it in a way that feels like yours. Use code CollectorsMD for 15% off your order. And big thanks to All Touch for supporting the show. Collect, protect, it's a peace of mind. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, intentional engagement, and the evolving culture surrounding the modern hobby. I'm your host, Alyx Efron, founder of Collectors MD, and today we're diving into a topic that I think will resonate with a lot of people listening. Whether you collect sports cards, have struggled with gambling, or simply find yourself navigating highly stimulating environments that can sometimes take on a life of their own. Joining us today is Lauren Johnson. Lauren is a licensed clinical social worker, Marine Corps veteran, mental performance coach, and founder of Ascent Wellness Group. Before becoming a therapist specializing in gambling and compulsive behaviors, Lauren experienced many of the same challenges that countless collectors and hobbyists face today. Through her company, The Playing Field, she became deeply immersed in sports cards and breaks, finding herself taking increasingly greater risks and blurring the lines between business, investing, and compulsion. At the same time, Lauren was also a clinician. Despite understanding addiction professionally, she found herself experiencing firsthand just how powerful and deceptive compulsive behaviors can become, particularly within highly stimulating environments designed around constant access, urgency, and dopamine. Today, Lauren uses both her lived experience and clinical expertise to help individuals struggling with gambling, compulsive behaviors, burnout, trauma, and performance pressure. In this episode, we're going to talk about her journey into collecting, therapy, and recovery, and the thin line between business and compulsion. Also, why highly functioning people are often especially vulnerable to addictive behaviors, the importance of resilience and community, and what it means to navigate what we're increasingly calling the dopamine economy. Lauren, I'm so grateful to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Alex, and thanks for having me on. I truly appreciate it. I'm glad we're diving into this topic.
Yeah, I'm so glad we got to connect. Obviously, we met through several mutual connections and friends within the recovery community. And
Absolutely.
I'm grateful for the fact that this industry has just embraced me. It's embraced Collectors MD and the work we're doing. And I'm so grateful to have somebody like yourself on. With that, we're going to dive right in.
Okay.
So segment one is your journey into collecting, therapy, and recovery. So for people who may not know your full story yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and the path that led you into behavioral health?
Sure thing. So I have a very unique perspective, right? I understood addiction clinically, right? I lived through it, through that sports cards business. So as we talked about Playing Field, I became deeply immersed in collecting and breaking, risk-taking behaviors. Over time, I learned firsthand how easily, hobby, a business, and a form of gambling really can become intertwined, And today I just use that lived experience, my clinical training to help, people build healthier relationships with themselves, with their behaviors and the environments, right, that they navigate. I think for me, my background is, coming from the Marine Corps, right? I understand and shaped discipline, resilience, accountability. Those are, core tenets of the Marine Corps, right? And so I understand that accountability is a big piece of it, but I found that over time that was lacking throughout this process. And as I was learning a little bit more about, even collecting and compulsions, right? Addiction doesn't discriminate, right? And so even though I understood discipline, resilience, accountability, I grew up in these environments. I have a history of collecting. I don't know, a lot of you, when we were small kids, I was a 90s kid, junk wax era, right?
Yeah.
That's what it was all about. I actually had my own little like baseball card stand, when I was a kid. And, I would sell cards one by one, $1 at the end of the driveway. Kids would have the lemonade stand. I had my little baseball card stand.
Yep.
So this started very early on, but it was for the love of it, right? I know that resonates with a lot of people. COVID happened, right? And collecting culture came back into the forefront. And so that's how I ended up there. Ultimately, down the road, I was like, oh, you know what? I really used to enjoy doing this thing when I was a kid. It was really special,
Yeah.
I just remembered how much I enjoyed it. And so, I found myself going to a car shop, and I found out that the landscape had changed significantly, right? I'm thinking, I'm going to go to the Walmart or whatever. No, there's these cards, go to the card shop. They're explaining this, new process to me. And I was just like, it felt so foreign, right? But then I found myself really, really diving into that space, ultimately, and curating a business out of it, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a common story that we hear over and over again, right?
Yeah.
But that's just how I ended up there. One day it was just like, me and my mom, I remember that was a shared love of ours, right? A lot of times it's a shared experience, right, with somebody that really cements that bond.
Right. Absolutely.
And so for me, I remember me and my mom really loving collecting. I collected comic books, all of these things when I was younger. But it was for the love of the game, right, at that time.
Yeah.
Once it started moving over into an investment and in a business and entrepreneurship, that's where things shifted for me. Because I recognize that for me, I noticed that once it started being about chasing outcomes more than it was actually about the collecting, I was like, wait, something's amiss here.
Yeah.
So, it started as enjoyment, really. It started as enjoyment and entrepreneurship and really becoming immersed in the culture. And my professional knowledge did not provide that immunity, right? Knowledge does not inoculate you from addiction, right? And I think that's what we tend to hold on to and grasp onto.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about how addiction doesn't discriminate anybody, and it's so incredibly true, right? And what you just talked about in terms of how things start to shift once you start to notice when passion starts evolving into something dangerous like compulsion. It's often very subtle, right? At first, we're like you're talking about. I grew up in the 90s too. Right. I experienced it firsthand. We genuinely enjoyed collecting. We liked the players, the designs, the nostalgia, the memories, the sense of connection that the hobby can provide. That's the beautiful side of collecting and hobby. But over time, without realizing it, our attention can begin shifting away from the cards themselves or the items themselves toward the outcomes that are attached to them. So instead of thinking like, wow, I love owning this card for X, Y, and Z, we start thinking about like, maybe this player is going to break out. Maybe this card is going to grade a PSA 10. Maybe this will double in value after the NBA finals. Maybe this break finally hits. Maybe this next purchase will give me that feeling all over again. And so the card really becomes a means to an end. And that's usually, I think, the signal. When we spend more time anticipating what could happen than really just appreciating what already exists, we're often no longer collecting for enjoyment alone. We're chasing possibilities. And that's not always inherently wrong. Most collectors can enjoy some degree of anticipation or investing or possibility, right? The possibility of a card going up in value, the possibility of a player breaking out. Like, these are all things that are healthy to be a part of. The problems arise when our satisfaction becomes entirely dependent on what happens next.
Right.
Because then enjoyment keeps getting postponed, right? The card is never enough. We need the grade. Then we need the player to perform. Then we need the market to rise in our favor. Then we need the right buyer. Then we need the next hit all over again. And the cycle repeats, right? And so the finish line, the goalpost just keeps moving. And before we know it, we're not really experiencing the hobby or a hobby anymore. We're pursuing an endless series of outcomes that promise fulfillment, but rarely allow us to sit in it for very long. So,
Right.
I just think a simple question I often come back to is like, if there were no next step attached to this card, like no grading, no profit, no breakout season, no future sale, would I still want it? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it isn't. And either way, the answer usually tells us something important about whether we're, appreciating the card or chasing the possibility.
Right.
So I'm curious, like with the clients that you're seeing now as it pertains to gambling addiction, are you seeing compulsive collecting becoming more problematic? Is it something that's coming up more and more in conversations and, screenings and things of that nature?
Absolutely. And the reason being is like we just live in very much an attention economy right now, right? So people are finding their way and navigating their way into these spaces. And so what I've found is that a lot of the times the compulsion is the symptom, right? There's a catalyst that's happening in the background, right? And it's trying to figure out and sort out what that catalyst, but the compulsion is the symptom, right? It's an escape, it's a way to kind of deal right now. It's a maladaptive, right? Coping, as we like to call it. So it is coming up in these spaces. And I think, I've been shouting this from the rooftops, we have a public health crisis that's barreling down on us, and we're not prepared for it at all. And there's so much more access. You got kids, right? Engaging in the Pokemon. We all know, right?
Yep.
It goes deep and it starts early, and it's one of those things where we just have to be very mindful. But yeah, it's just it is showing up. I actually add that now to the end. It's like, okay. Right. When we think of gambling rarely announces itself as gambling. Right. So now it's kind of finding these new paths and new ways to move forward. And it's upon us as the clinicians and providers and broader community to understand and recognize now those triggers or those symptoms. Right.
Absolutely.
So that might be something. Okay, I might ask, gambling. When you think of table games, slot machines, historic, traditional, right, forms of gambling. Well, do you ever find yourself, on these sites, right? Oh yeah, I have been on that site. Have you ever engaged in this activity or this activity? Do you find that you're moving beyond your budget? Do you have the capacity to stop? Do you have the capacity to avoid any urges or set yourself on an urge delay? No, I can't do that. I find that I need to go in. Okay, so now we're talking about chasing losses, right?
Yep.
We're talking about future perceived value. Same thing, sunk cost fallacy, right?
Yep.
Future perceived values are not guaranteed. And so you're paying into something, right, with an unknown outcome. What does that sound like? So it just finds new paths and new ways forward, and that's just something that we want to be mindful of.
Yeah, well said. It's so interesting because so many of these platforms refuse to acknowledge it, but a lot of these industries are essentially borrowing the same playbook casinos and sportsbooks have used for years, whether intentionally or unintentionally, right? Okay. And the formula is create anticipation, add that level of uncertainty, make rewards unpredictable, remove friction, and keep people engaged. And whether it's sports betting, card breaks, live selling apps, even social media, right? You have it in gaming with loot boxes, and you have it in investing with the gamified, the gamification of everything. You go into the Robinhood app and you go to make a trade, explosion of confetti, right? Like everything is just gamified now. And the underlying message is always the same. Right. Maybe the next one is the one.
Maybe the next one is the one.
For most people, it's entertainment or it's investing. But when multiple industries are all competing for our attention using the same psychological mechanisms, it's not surprising that we're seeing more people struggle with compulsive behaviors, the overspending, the burnout, the addiction. And that's why this is becoming, like you said, a public health conversation, not just a gambling conversation. And
Right.
it's only gonna get worse from here on out. And so we're going to touch on all of this as part of, I think, our fourth segment. I want to get back to your personal story.
Right.
So how did your experience in the Marine Corps shape the person and clinician you are today?
How did it, well, because I've talked about it shaped me as far as like my discipline, my resilience, right? I always say resilience is felt and earned, right? And so over time, engaging and being in the Marine Corps, it's part of the reason what led me, right, to understanding, wanting to know a little bit about my own human behavior, right?
Right.
I've always had this fascination and interest, but the things that were showing up for me as an OIF veteran after I got out of service and that transition, I wanted to learn a little bit more about that, whether it was like post-traumatic stress disorder, some of those compulsions. And, veterans have a tendency to have a higher engagement with compulsive behaviors because of that. We talked about intermittent reinforcement, but that dopamine, right? That dopamine exchange, right? It's just a way of finding new places to engage in that. So, as far as me, how it had shaped me as a clinician, I really understand mental performance under pressure, and so that's been helpful for me.
Awesome. And I'm sure there's a lot more that you learn as part of everything from basic training to your actual experience in the trenches that, you can apply to your life, forever, not just the recovery world or, overcoming addiction. But I just find it so interesting that you have that as part of your, your experience and your resume. I mean, it's really noble. And, of course, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Yeah, I tell people I'm battle tested, man.
Yeah, you're battle tested. Absolutely.
So, that's what was part of me. I had to dive back deep into that part of me and pull that part of me out as I was moving through recovery. Right? There are some hard moments and hard times that you experience. You know what I mean? And so for me, I have, my compatriots that have lost their lives, right? And we've heard about the high suicide ideation and high rates of veteran suicide. So for me, it was just like really tapping into that part of you're strong, you're resilient. You've been in a war zone, for heaven's sakes. Like,
right.
I don't like the bootstrapper mentality. I think that's BS. I think it's all a part of community, right? You need community, you need support, right? There's a part of it that is bootstrapping that you kind of have to be accountable for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And want to engage in getting the assistance and support and engage in the community. Yeah, there's that part of it, right? But for me, it's just like, I was like pull it together, okay, dude. Like, you are still here, you are still surviving. You can still survive this. You can thrive, right? Okay. And when you've been through hardships like that over and over again, throughout your life or throughout, my experience in the Marine Corps, there's a mental toughness and what we call intestinal fortitude that you gain from that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we get disconnected from those parts of ourselves, and for me, it was just like really being like, hey, man, you're a United States Marine. Like, you got this. You've done some hard stuff. This is not the end of the line for you by any means.
Right.
And that's that, like I said, resiliency sometimes. I wish I could bottle it up.
But it also speaks volumes of how hard addiction can be to cope with, right? Like, even being battle tested, even being through the experience you had in the Marines, you still ended up falling into these, these traps, these patterns. Jared, one of our community members who's joined us today, he said in the comments, it strikes me that the patience serving in the military instills in you would translate really well to the steps of recovery. And absolutely, I think, like you're talking about, one thing that the Marines teaches you quickly, I'm sure, is that resilience isn't built when everything is going well. It's built in the suck. It's built through discomfort, adversity,
through hardship,
old moments, right? And recovery is no different. And I don't want to compare the two in a direct way because it's apples to oranges, but every hard day you get through in recovery, every urge you sit with, every challenge you face without returning to old behaviors, you're building that resilience that you're talking about. You're building that strength. You're proving to yourself little by little that you can handle hard things. And so there's definitely a lot of synergies there. I want to get into
building blocks,
100%. I want to get into the Playing Field, which is the company that you had started when you were immersed in the hobby.
Right.
What was the Playing Field, and how did sports cards become, part of your entrepreneurial journey?
For me, again, talking about, in my youth, just that connection, that nostalgia, I really was longing for that. I think for me specifically, it was an escape. It was like an escape into this world. I was adulting. We're all adulting. It's so, it's so hard. Boo, and adulting. You're adulting the day to day. And for me, I was looking and needing an escape. And I found that, in the Playing Field. It was, my main thing is I felt so very isolated. I think it was just like sometimes we get into the day-to-day of living, right? Work, come home, it's like I'm a parent too. So, for the parents out there, and it was just like I felt like I was on this wheel, right? And so for me, building up the Playing Field was just an escape. It allowed me to engage in this other part of me and other community. So my tagline was Cards Collectibles Community, right? With an emphasis on the community part, because that's what I felt like I was lacking in a way in my own life. And that was a need for me at the time. So, being engaged and immersed in collecting culture, it was so fun. It was very there's a childlike wonderment in it all, right? And it was very enjoyable. I'm not gonna lie, there was a part of it that was just so enjoyable. It was different, and as a clinician, there was a way to disconnect, right, for me, from this very clinical world that I was, surviving and thriving in, right? To something that was just simple. It's a comic book, it's a card, it's, basically that.
Yeah. Can you pinpoint a moment when collecting started becoming something different? And did you recognize what was happening while you were living it?
And this is a great question. I actually knew when the decision, and I think I said this previously, it was less about the cards and more about chasing the outcomes or the perceived value or the what ifs. Like, we talked about that earlier. We touched on it a little bit. It was like, I didn't care what the card was anymore. It was like, is this going to provide value? Is there value here? And it stopped being about the love and enjoyment, right? That's for the and when you start setting, and we've all been there before, when you start setting a budget, right? And you find yourself continually blowing past it, but all businesses need a budget, right? Operating cost, all that good stuff. When you start blowing past the budget and start engaging in more sunk cost fallacy, I say it again, sunk cost fallacy to my clients as well. I can't determine the outcome of any card. We really can't. We have all heard it before. It's what folks are willing to pay, right? And at any given moment, that could go up or that could go down. Right. And so it's when I started really becoming attached to the value, and as a business, you need to, in a certain way, in certain respects, right, be attached to value. But when you're blowing past that budget consistently, one time maybe, right, you can say, that happened. But when you're not setting the boundaries and you're blowing past those boundaries and budgets, I was like, wait a minute. I can stop this, but why aren't I, right?
Right.
Tuning into that, tapping it. Why can't I stop myself from doing this?
Right.
Yeah. Why am I doing this so late? Now it's going late into the early hours of the morning,
Right. Yeah.
and at this time I'm working a full-time job and being a clinician too. So it's like, wait, something's not right here, man.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
Typically when we start to participate in activities we know might be dangerous, harmful, maybe wrong to some extent, most of the time we're somewhat aware of it, right? You can feel it in your gut. You could feel something is off. You could feel something isn't right. But what really worries me, going back, and we keep referencing it, we're going to touch on it more later, but the public health crisis. What worries me is that as adults, many of us struggle to recognize concepts like sunk cost fallacy, chasing launches, variable rewards, intermittent reinforcement. And we have fully developed brains and life experience, right? Our children were exposed to these environments, supposed to navigate this. How are they supposed to recognize that I've already spent this much, I might as well keep going, is just cognitive distortion? How are they supposed to understand that the excitement they're feeling is being intentionally reinforced by things like uncertainty and anticipation? Most of them can't. They're still developing impulse control, emotional regulation, long-term decision-making skills. And that's why this can't simply be a conversation about personal responsibility. We also have to talk about education, awareness, and creating environments that help young people understand the psychological forces they're being exposed to before those forces begin shaping their behaviors. And that's why I just get so emotionally frustrated when we talk about how platforms just absolutely refuse to do anything. They refuse to acknowledge the elephant in the room. They don't want to say the G word. They don't want to align with the work we're doing because it forces them to acknowledge the G word. And that's where I start to see real issues arising when senior leaders across these major corporations, these major companies that are bringing in billions of dollars. These are individuals who are parents. They have young children. They have kids that are potentially involved in these environments and actively collecting, yet there's like a missing link. It's like, what don't you get? Right. Yeah. And so that's where it starts to get frustrating. I want to ask you one more question on this segment, and then we're going to shift over to segment 2. But how difficult was it to admit that you needed help?
Oh, I mean, it's how much time you got?
We got time,
man. How much time do we have? There's shame thrives in secrecy. You know what I mean? And it thrives there. And there's so much shame that's involved in knowing that. I mean, I'm a clinician, right? It's like I understand and know on a level, right?
Right.
And I still allowed myself to go there. And it's high functioning people. There are so many high functioning folks who are struggling with addiction, but we just hide it so much better, right? We're able to engage in, I think the common conception, right, is, you're struggling, there's all the, I wasn't struggling. I was working full time, I mean, I was doing okay. I had all the traditional, kind of milestones that you would consider for a healthy, wealthy, high functioning individual. Right. But it's just like, to answer your question, and what was the question again? I got lost here. I'm lost in my thought. I'm going.
No worries. How difficult was it to admit that you needed help?
Oh, it was absolutely, you have all these people around you, right, that you feel are doing well. And then here you are engaging in, we like to, degenerate gambling, whatever, this somewhat aligned degeneracy, right? And I can't use that term. I think it's like silly, but I have always been an individual who has pulled myself, and we go back to that resiliency, that conversation around resiliency. I've always found a way I've always managed to find a way, and I've always found a path, to get myself out. This was one of those spaces or places where I didn't have a plan. I didn't know exactly how I was going to move out of this or get myself back to a place of stability.
Right.
And that was saying a lot. There's very much an underlying perfectionist. I feel like a lot of times there's, especially with, what we call high functioning, we can use that terminology just for today's, but it's like, how did I get here? Number one, how do I get out of here? What's the solution to this? I don't really have a fully fledged solution for this.
Right.
Now I'm going to have to tell people about it.
Right.
And the shame around that, knowing background, I was the individual that, my friends and family would come to for financial advice around things, because I've always been that person who has been financially sound, right?
Yeah.
And so for me to be in this position, in this place, to admit that I was defeated, that was hard, right? And so it came back to the accountability part, and that goes back to being a Marine too. There's an accountability, right? I needed an accountability for myself. I needed to have accountability to others. And so it was time to just say, hey, and ask for help.
Yep.
I think our culture, especially here in the States, right, is very much the independence, rugged individualist, right, out there doing the things themselves, pulling themselves, bootstrapping, right?
Right.
And we've moved so far from community. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We just keep moving and isolating and moving away from that community component element.
So many things that you just said resonate with me so deeply, because I can relate on so many levels in terms of like being the oldest of three, how my younger brother and younger sister have looked up to me my entire life, right? As long as I can remember. And I remember the day that I went to my family. Well, my parents had already known about my addiction, but I admitted to my younger sister, my younger brother, for the first time, that I was a gambling addict and that I had a serious problem and I needed to get professional help.
Right.
And they both reacted the exact same way. And I had told them independently, because one came home after the other. At the time, they were both living with my parents. And they both reacted the same way. They broke down in tears. They didn't know what they were hearing. It was so foreign. The idea of me, their older brother that they looked up to, that they relied on for advice. And to your point, like so many things, it was imperfect, had this problem. It didn't register, right? And the only way they could react in that moment was to cry. And it broke my heart. I still remember it to this day. I mean, this was 3.5 years ago, but it really, really stuck with me. One of the things I appreciate most about your story, Lauren, is that it completely challenges stereotypes, right? A lot of people still imagine addiction as something that only affects individuals whose lives are visibly falling apart. But that's often not reality. Addiction doesn't discriminate. We're going to keep coming back to that. Nope. It can affect clinicians. It can affect entrepreneurs, veterans, parents, executives, people who appear highly successful, highly functioning from the outside. Many people maintain careers, homes, relationships, responsibilities, while quietly fighting battles that nobody else can see. Sometimes the very traits that make someone successful, like you were just talking about, being driven, competitive, resilient, solution oriented, those traits can make it harder to recognize when something has crossed the line, right? Because if you're high functioning, it's very easy to tell yourself that you're fine. And that's what makes these conversations so important. So we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is the thin line between business, investing, and compulsion. So you often talk about there being a very thin line between those three things: business, investing, and gambling. What do you mean by that?
I always go back to like the overlap is marginal, right? between collecting, investing, the entrepreneurship element component, and the gambling, right? It's
Right.
a very thin line and a thin margin, especially when there are no parameters or controls set in place, right? It can spiral out of control very quickly. You know, investing looks like knowing an item's perceived worth or value at the same time, right? Knowing that, hey, this could go up or down. But as you understanding and knowing that this is an investment that I'm making, right? When it's come to collecting, but also knowing that there are outcomes that you cannot manage or nor control, and going in with that concept and that notion and that understanding, because there in any business, right, there's going to be a level of risk taking. You building a business in the first place is it's a level of risk.
Yeah.
That's just part of the equation when you start a business.
Hey, waking up in the morning and crossing the
Yeah,
street,
everything,
you know?
but that thin line is very much, you can, once it starts causing social impairment, that's kind of my go-to, right? It's like, if it starts causing social impairment where it's impacting your mood, the way you sleep, creating any kind of anxieties, right? We're thinking about mood disorders, if it's causing discomfort. When you start doing it in secrecy, right? The
Right.
secrecy, when you start engaging in losses, like chasing losses, right? That's when that thin line, it's very thin line that you can start moving into that space of addictive behaviors,
Right.
And again, it's that overlap is so small. The rationalization, I call it, becomes increasingly sophisticated. Oh, well, I'm due. This is an investment. I'm different. Oh, well, I got all these other things, right? Right. So no, it's not going to happen. And my main thing is the secrecy.
Yeah.
I knew when it starts being, oh, how much did you, how much you been spending on the business? Oh, yeah.
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 What?
Right.
The secrecy is a big indication.
Yeah.
Because what's done in the dark comes to the light eventually, right?
Yeah.
As the saying goes. And it's one of those things where if you can't confidently answer and you're hiding a little bit of that, yeah, you might be taking a little bit more risk-taking, gambling adjacent behaviors.
Yeah. Well said. I think there's also something to be said about this extra layer of shame with something like compulsive collecting, because from the outside, it doesn't look like an addiction. People see cards, Pokemon, sports, and think, at least it's not drugs or alcohol.
There's a tangible asset.
You're just buying collectibles.
Right?
Like you're doing something that kids do. Meanwhile, the person struggling may be hiding purchases, lying about spending, staying up until the wee hours, joining breaks, draining their savings, lying to their loved ones, and feeling completely out of control. And that disconnect can be incredibly isolating, even more isolating than admitting we have a traditional gambling addiction, right? Because not only do you feel ashamed about your behavior, but you also feel like nobody would understand it if you told them. So you inherently keep it to yourself. And like most addictions, secrecy tends to feed the problem. You start carrying two burdens at once, the addiction itself, and then the loneliness and isolation of feeling like you're the only person that's going through what you're going through, which is why peer support and being a part of a community like Collectors MD plays such a vital role in recovery. We can't heal in isolation. We have to heal in group.
And I want to touch on something you said too. That was the investment piece. Well, I have a tangible asset.
Right.
There's something that I can physically hold. And not to say that other addictions or addictive disorders or behaviors don't have that, right? If it's substances, yeah, you can hold that, but it's a physiological shift and change.
Right.
Right. Where we're experiencing as collectors or folks with any kind of like disordered gambling or problem gambling is that it's happening here in the body. Yes, it's still physiologically, but it's just happening in a different space, but similar, right? Same rewards and Same, the brain is lighting up. The neuroscience behind it is very much the same.
Absolutely.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right. So, but there was always that like, oh, but I have this tangible asset, right? So
Right.
it is an investment. I do have a physical thing that I could sell. But how many of you went to, well, I can't sell it now. It was always like, I can't sell it now.
Yeah.
Right. That perceived
It's not liquid.
value.
Yeah. People get the wrong idea. They just assume that these tangible items are so liquid that you could just, post it up on a marketplace and get cashed out within the same day. Like, it doesn't work that way, especially when it comes to cards. You see the sneakers behind me, right? So I collected sneakers throughout the majority of my 20s. At one point, had over 550 pairs of sneakers in these drop front containers stacked to the ceiling on every single wall of my apartment. It was completely deranged, but I just, it became a part of my identity, and it was something I was so passionate about. And the way I would justify it was, this is my version of a diversified portfolio. These are assets. These are things that I could eventually sell. And what I didn't realize at the time was, I was addicted, and I was starting to develop early signs of serious compulsive behaviors. So, my addiction is deep rooted. It started really when I was a kid, but started to escalate when I hit my 20s, my adulthood, and I could afford to buy these expensive sneakers. Right. And, I would justify it, and I didn't realize that sneakers don't last forever. They deteriorate over time. Like, I would go to sell a pair of sneakers that I had for 5-10 years, and I would, post, or I would sell it through StockX, and then I would receive an email a couple days later from StockX that they didn't pass authentication because they were yellowing, or the midsole cracking, or something along those lines. And it's like, oh shoot, like, this isn't as liquid as I had originally anticipated. So anyway, eventually over time, I curated the collection down to basically what you see behind me, 20 pairs. And it's not even like the most valuable or the most expensive pairs. It's just like the pairs that mean something to me and hold sentimental value maybe I've had for, a long time, or like are tied to a core memory, things of that nature. Same thing with the cards. Right. What did Jared say here? Alyx never recovered from being gifted a pair of tennis pumps. Yeah, exactly. That's how I got hooked, the tennis pumps. So moving along, what role did the card breaks play in accelerating the behavior for you?
I think it's the instant attention economy, right? It's like, it was so easy, the access that you have. It's attached to your card. You just go right in. It's very lively. The dopamine is firing, right? Again, I want to go back to like compulsions. Sometimes those compulsions for me and you, right? We're high functioning, very, very intelligent folks who have done really well actually for ourselves over the course of our careers, right? Because we maybe were willing to think outside the box and take big risk and all that stuff like that. So those compulsions historically, right, may have been a benefit if utilized in the correct, environment, right? However, once, I got onto the sites, you're on, whatnot and all that. Like, it was just very lively. And remember that community part, Cards Collectibles community, that community part is realistically what I was seeking. Yeah. That was the part that really drew me in. Right. Engaging with other people in the hobby or in the culture, or who, were nerds like me, growing up and loved these comic books. That community component and element really drew me in. Yeah. And that's the part that really made me stay for as long as I did, right? Yeah. It was like engaging with other people who were in the hobby and collecting, and just as nerded out as me, around these assets, right? Tangible assets that we were collecting. The community part, man, brother, that was really what I was seeking. And you'll notice that when you're in, once you're in recovery and you're looking back, it was like, that was the piece that was missing. Yeah. That component was missing from my life. And so I just continually engaged in the community. And unfortunately for us, that engagement in the community comes with cost. You know, so
Yep.
that's engaging in breaks. You know, that's them shouting out your name in the chat. Maybe you getting a little promotion or
Right.
marketing from that, right? You know,
Yeah.
again, it all becomes a business. This is all it's in business, right?
Right.
And so there's pieces of that yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're talking about too, it's like not just the cognitive distortions and the rationalizing, but like there's other elements that people get hooked on, like the social media,
Right.
the validation, having a breaker shout your name because you hit a big card. People get addicted to that too. Like there's layers to it, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, these digital environments, these live breaks kind of like recreate a sense of camaraderie. It's like a popularity contest in a lot of ways. The hobby so often reminds me of like high school or like Greek life, college, right? Because it's like it's a popularity contest, and you know, these breakers and hobby influencers and individuals that are, you know, deeply immersed become like pseudo celebrities, and it becomes a pissing contest, and you know, everybody just wants recognition, and then like when they don't get it, they become jealous, and then they call them out, and then there are watchdogs, and then there's all this drama and gossip, and it just turns into this like giant cluster of just, you know, negativity. And it's
those
not
great culture and reinforcement loops, they work, man. They know what they're doing. Those variable reward schedules that you're on, you know. And like as high performers, right, we often believe we can just outsmart the risk. Oh, I got this. I know that there's a formula here. Once I figure it out, you know.
What cognitive distortions do you think people tell themselves to keep leaning in?
Ooh. I think, okay, well, we talked about the perceived value.
Right.
Future perceived value, the distortion. You know, $1 million card gets sold, and we believe we're going to be one of those folks who are going to luckily end up with one of those in our hands, and it's going to be life changing. It's going to change our lives. A lot of it for me personally, and for clients that I see, is that main distortion of value. It always comes down to the money, brother. You know, it's like, you know, I have folks who just won't let go because they think, you know, they have such a large inventory of cards. It's that future perceived value that that gets its hooks into you. You know what I mean? And so that's the biggest distortion. I can stop it whenever I want.
Right.
You know, like this is just like, you know, well, yeah, we can stop you if we remove all financial access. But if you have access, can you realistically stop? You know?
Yeah. It's tough because, you know, the first step of addiction is acknowledging that addiction has consumed our lives, and that we've become powerless, and that we're no longer in the driver's seat. And so many people have such a hard time accepting that and wrapping their head around the word powerless, right? And often these people are intelligent and they're clever and they're successful, like we were talking about before. Why do you think intelligent people often believe they're the exception?
Oh man, gosh, it's just like, I mean, well, honestly, a lot of times, like I talked about before, right? Maybe historically they have been able to figure it out, right? You know what I mean? Historically, you know, it's like, okay, I'm gonna rub put these brain cells to work, and I'm gonna make it happen. You know, I'm gonna figure this out. And I've noticed that high performers often don't reach out for help or support as much. It's very siloed. It's the secrecy thing, right?
Yep.
And when you get into a hiccup like this, right? This you need accountability and support and recognition of like, hey, there's something wrong here, right? This isn't the usual, you know, me resourcefully creating solutions to a problem, right? There's something wrong here.
Right.
And I think a lot of times it's just like with high performers, right? They get caught. It's ego, right?
Ego.
There's some ego involved. You know, I want to be the man. I want to be the woman. I want to be the person, the individual. Like
Ego and I think a sense of entitlement.
yeah, I got this. I've done this before. I've been here before,
Jared says here, stopping is only one step. That's true, but it's also the biggest step. Stopping and acknowledging you have a problem. That's half the battle, man. Getting your ass in one of those rooms, being there for other people, putting it out there, like that's really half the battle. Once you do that, the rest comes.
The stopping part is the hardest part. It is step one, but it is one of the biggest steps that people struggle with. They just
what's underrated.
This is regarding any kind of compulsions or addiction or substance use or addictive behaviors.
Yeah,
the stopping is the hardest part.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what else is really underrated that doesn't get addressed enough is not just showing up for that first meeting, showing up for that second meeting. Right. How many times have you been to a meeting or seen a client or went into a recovery setting where a person comes in, maybe they're looking like wide-eyed and overwhelmed. Maybe they share, they have a good session, they leave, they're encouraged to come back only to never be seen again.
Right. And it happens fairly often because it's like, I don't have a problem. Oh, this person, this individual, they hear the stories, they go, well, that's not me. Right. I'm not there. Right. So I don't have a problem. I don't have an issue. What am I doing here? Right. Yeah. I always say it's like, man, if you could take a picture of an individual coming in for the first day and then like 90 days later, even, I've talked about this in some of the smart recovery or whatnot. It's like, if you could take that picture on that first day and then look back 90 days later, once you got enough clean time under you, regardless of what the addictive behavior or disorder is, man, the change and the shift you see in that 90 days, heck, even 30 days, just engaging in the community and the supporting network and resources that are out there for you. Right. Yeah. The first step is the hardest.
Yeah.
The first step is maybe even not stopping, just coming in. Just come in.
Just come in. Show up,
Yeah, just show up, man.
Test the waters. But like in all seriousness, like showing up consistently, continuing to come back is so critical in recovery. So many people think that, they can get prescribed a solution or a medication or a program and they'll be able to recover. They'll be able to fully heal. It doesn't work like that in recovery. Recovery is a terminal illness. It's a disease and it stays with you indefinitely for the rest of your life. Sure, you can put it into remission and you can be sober for however long, but all it takes is one small slip up for us to backtrack and lose all the progress that we made. I wrote a daily reflection today that I want to share real quick, if you don't mind. And I haven't shared it across social media yet, but it is something that I say in these recovery settings all the time. And that's batting 1,000 in recovery. Right. And if you don't mind, I'll just read it real quick, because I thought it was like one of the most poignant reflections that I've written to date. Not to pat myself on the back, but again, like I talk about this concept all the time and I just haven't put pen to paper yet. And so I published this morning. So in a lot of ways, recovery can be compared to baseball analytics. In baseball, even the greatest players in the world are expected to fail most of the time. In recovery, however, the margins are far less forgiving. A player who gets a hit 3 out of every 10 at-bats is considered exceptional. A 300 batting average can earn you all-star appearances, MVP votes, and potentially a plaque in Cooperstown. Think about that for a moment. The very best players in the world fail roughly 70% of the time. Recovery doesn't work that way. In recovery, we're asked to do something far more difficult. We have to bat 1,000. No pop flies, no ground outs, no strikeouts. Every single day requires another quality at bat. A single might look like attending a meeting when you don't feel like it. A double might be making an uncomfortable phone call, setting a boundary, or deleting an app that's been pulling at you. A triple might be sitting with anxiety, grief, loneliness, or boredom without escaping into old behaviors. A home run might be making it through one of the worst days of your life without gambling, spending, or chasing something to numb the pain. The challenge is that nobody gets to call timeout. life keeps throwing us curveballs. There are layoffs, divorces, financial problems, deaths, health scares, relationship issues, unexpected triggers. Life has a way of delivering moments that blindside us without warning and lie completely outside our control. We've all seen it happen. 1 year of sobriety, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, recovery milestones that once seemed unmanageable, followed by a relapse no one saw coming. A sobering reminder that complacency can emerge at any stage of the journey. Not because we suddenly forgot everything we learned, not because we don't care about our recovery, but because recovery doesn't reward yesterday's at-bats. It asks us to step into the batter's box again today, and again tomorrow, and again the day after that. In baseball, batting 300 makes you elite. In recovery, one bad swing can change everything. This isn't meant to create fear, it's meant to create humility. The thought of batting 1,000 for the rest of our lives can sound overwhelming, even impossible, but recovery rarely asks us to solve the rest of our lives today. It simply asks us to take responsibility for today. A one day at a time mindset transforms an intimidating lifelong commitment into something far more approachable, realistic, and manageable. We don't have to worry about every future temptation all at once. We simply have to focus on the at-bat in front of us and make the best decision we can with the pitch we're currently being thrown. Recovery isn't something we achieve once and keep forever. It's something we protect, nurture, and recommit to every single day. Every meeting, every boundary, every honest conversation, every difficult emotion we allow ourselves to feel instead of escape. Every decision to pick up the phone instead of pick up old behaviors. Those are our base hits. And eventually those base hits start to add up, strengthening our confidence and deepening our resilience to face whatever pitch comes next. The irony is that while recovery requires us to bat 1,000, none of us do it perfectly. We all have moments of complacency, close calls, and the situations where we realize just how vulnerable we still are. That's exactly why we stay connected, hold ourselves accountable, and keep showing up, not just for ourselves, but for each other. Well, recovery isn't about becoming invincible. It's about respecting the fact that one swing can change the game. So today, take your next at bat seriously, protect your recovery, stay humble, stay connected, and keep putting the ball in play. Recovery isn't about predicting every future pitch. It's about stepping into today's batter box and doing the best we can with the pitch we're currently being thrown. Thank you for letting me read that. I see you doing a little dance. Oh yeah,
that was great, Alex.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and honestly, the takeaway, just to close out this segment, is that many people struggling with compulsive collecting or compulsive behaviors, gambling addiction, they don't fit in traditional stereotypes. On paper, their lives may look completely put together. They have jobs, they have homes, they have families, they pay their bills, they may even be successful in business. But behind the scenes, they're increasingly consumed by things like chasing, rationalizing risk, spending enormous amounts of time and mental energy trying to regain a feeling that seems just out of reach. And that's what makes these behaviors so difficult to recognize. The progression is often subtle, right? One purchase becomes another, one break becomes another, one justification becomes another. And before long, the cards can start feeling secondary to the action themselves. So with that, Lauren, we're going to switch over to our third segment, which is recovery resilience, which I know we keep coming back to, and healing in community.
Word of the day, man.
Love it. So what finally motivated you to seek help?
Oh my gosh. I think for me, it was family, it was friends, it was, spouse, it was accountability for me, right? I knew that I needed outside help. And for me, knowing and what I understand about the process of recovery is that healing happens in connection. It just does, right? And so what ultimately changed is, my recovery wasn't then about more information, because there's some knowledge gaps that I have too, right, as a clinician.
Right.
But it was less about, more information is always good. Knowledge is power. We all know that. But for me, the catalyst was I needed connection. It was connection. And so that isolation that was fueling the addiction, the shame, I knew that recovery really requires accountability and adaptability, right? Community creates safety, just reaching out for help, and for me, is like recovery is a practice, right? It's not in a single event, right? It's something that you have to engage in order to be successful. And just having known other people in recovery, or with addictive disorders, the community element was always just shouted from the rooftops, and I knew that that was something that I was going to need. I mean, I believe in it. I'm a delusional optimist, right? So it comes back to that, having that passive of and the resiliency word. We said it again. Yes, put a star in the comments every time we say resiliency. But people are far more resilient than they realize, including myself, right? I've seen individuals rebuild careers, relationships, finances, identities after believing everything was lost. And so I've known those stories. I've heard those stories. I've been a part of those stories. And it just so happens that I found myself on the other side of it, so.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. So what role did community play in your recovery?
Oh, accountability. That's the other word, right? Resiliency and accountability, man. Those two, go hand in hand. And resiliency wasn't just about toughness. It was about adaptability. Can I now move forward knowing what I know about myself and still put forth good into the world, still, have good relationships, find all of those things, right? So, it's just like, sometimes it's not about, changing your entire life. For me, I knew it was about finding one thing that was worth showing up that day. And for me, it was my family, my little dude. And I just knew that's something that I really hold near and dear. And that was what was going to keep me accountable at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Why do you believe healing happens in group rather than isolation?
Because isolation is where addiction thrives. So what, the countermeasure to that would then be what? The opposite end of the spectrum, right, would be then community engagement, outside perspectives, outside resources, outside goals, right? It's right. Like, I think that when it's so isolated and it's so intrinsic, right, that's where addiction thrives. And a lot of times in many communities outside of compulsive collecting, we're just talking about addiction as a whole, as a whole. The common theme that shows up was this: I just felt so alone, and there's that isolation piece, and that's where it thrives. So then, it's like, what would be the intervention for isolation?
Yeah.
Community. Right? Connection, engagement, more accountability partners.
More accountability, yep.
More accountability partners. The more accountability partners you can have, I subscribe to that. I feel like your recovery, it's not going to be the easiest, right? But it's gonna add that one component or one element that's just going to counter, right, that isolation and addictive behaviors. And that shame that's thriving in secrecy, right? Getting it out.
Yeah.
And that's not for everybody, right? You can limit those people who, engage, me and you are a little bit more willing to be open.
Right.
Because we know that this could be helpful, right? There's a certain component of it, like, let's say Black women, right? Like we're out there, we're there, but maybe just seeing my face and understanding that, there's somebody out there who also I identify, there's that intersectionality, right, that we want to also be mindful and cognizant of.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting point, because you're 100% right. Not everybody is extroverted or outgoing or is going to put themselves out there, right? A lot of people are reserved and right. And so it can be a lot more intimidating for some people than it is for others. Mm-hmm. The other valid point you brought up is race, gender, identity. Like, these are all things that, especially when it comes to things like gambling or collecting, right? Like, it's a very male dominant industry. And so if you were to join one of our weekly meetings, you'll see that 85% of the people joining are men, right? And so I think a couple weeks ago we had a woman join us, and there were a few other women. They just had their cameras off that night.
Right.
And the woman said, she turned her camera on. She went to share, and she said, "I don't know if this is the right place for me. I notice I'm the only woman here, and I feel out of place, right?" And we ended up letting her know that, like, regardless of gender, regardless of race, creed, religion, identity, like, everybody belongs here. This is a safe space for any and everyone. That, of course, first and foremost, we also acknowledge the other women in the room and the fact that we do have women coming in and out of these spaces, and that's really important. But to your point, like, finding that community or being willing to walk into a room with other people, that could be really challenging for a lot of people. And it's easier said than done. And I know we preach it all the time, and how community is everything. And the most important thing for me with community is step 12, which is paying it forward and helping other people, not just showing up for yourself, but showing up for your neighbor. Right. And so
there's a certain empowerment that's
right. We have to be empathetic to the fact that not everybody's going to be willing to enter those types of environments. Yeah, Jared just mentioned her share. The woman I referenced, he said her share was so powerful, and I'm so glad she stayed. She did end up staying. She did end up sharing, and she helped Jared open up that night along with other people. So it was.
You just never know. You just never know how your story, or you come into the forefront. And like we said, with this, it's not everyone needs to do that, right? It's not a necessary component of recovery, fully being in recovery. It's your recovery story. It's yours to share or not, really. It's nobody's business at the end of the day. And with saying that, I do know that I do have a more outward clinical practice, professional development. I've been more outward with my story, just in the hopes that, it could help somebody. And for me, it was empowering, right? But that doesn't mean that that's everybody's story, nor does that need to be everybody's story, right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying.
Yeah. It's so interesting too, because you and I have such different backgrounds and upbringings, yet we have so much in common. Like, so much of what you've shared today and what you've shared with me, before today, just like, man, like, I feel like I'm looking in the mirror, right? Like, seriously, like, so much of what you're saying just hits home. And I mean, that's exactly it. I feel like putting myself out there and sharing my story, my lived experience, I do that in an effort to help other people. And I always say, if I can make a difference for one person, right? Just one person, this is all worth it. Right. I've gone on into these environments on podcasts. We talked about before how the hobby can be a really toxic place. They're really hostile. Like, there's a lot of naysayers and stone throwers and people that just think I'm like doing this for a quick cash grab, or like I'm a grifter or something along those lines. And, I've been accused of being a corporate plant or a paid actor, like all this nonsense. Right. And it's like, that doesn't happen often, but I've been in environments like that. And I've always said I would fight those battles. I would combat those trolls, those naysayers, night in and night out, if it meant it made an impact or I was making a difference for just one person.
Right.
So the fact that we're able to help hundreds of people and hopefully eventually thousands is something that I'm deeply grateful for. And it's something I've dedicated my life to. Yeah. So, Lauren,
something about knowing the language, right? There's a language. There's a language, right, in these particular spaces. So just being able to speak that same language and understanding, when I say, so you chased rainbow. Oh, so you're a rainbow, like we understand there's a
vernacular
language and vernacular that, is a part of this community, and being able to speak that language too has been helpful. Sometimes my lived experience is going to make me that much greater of a clinician. I just, and I wholeheartedly believe that. And I could, yes, I could dive into the shame of it and just and stay there and lament, right? But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I am a very cerebral person. So for me, I pick it apart. I'm like, what's going on? What's the neuroscience behind this? What's happening in the body?
Yeah.
What's the soma, right? And that's where I start nerding out and going into the deep dive. And it's only made me a better clinician, having a better understanding, because now I can say I also understand what's physically happening in the body as well,
Yeah.
And so making that connection and that distinction, that's what gives me a unique perspective. And so, there was a lot of shame, right, that came from that, but there was also like, well, let me take this shame and really pick it apart and understand why do I feel shame? Why do I feel fear? Why do I fear what others are going to judge me or think about me?
Yeah.
There's a component of that's like, well, there's a professional element and component to it too, but hey, you get peer support and a licensed clinical social worker in me. So that's a benefit to me. So it's like I said, we discussed it's not for everybody, but it was very empowering once I kind of let go of that, the ego.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ego, the big part. Yeah.
Yeah. Ego, self, entitlement, things of that nature. Yeah. I brought up real quick the CMD hobby dictionary that we created a while back. You could see how complex it is, right? And like a lot of these words are hobby language. And the purpose here isn't just for collectors to understand the nuances if they're staying within our intentional collecting lane, which is our version of harm reduction, but it's for parents and friends and spouses and siblings and people who are connected to individuals in the hobby who are speaking this language to be able to check out. And if they use the word refractor, what does refractor mean? You can and see what it means. They use the word, I don't know, I'm just going to randomly pick one. Subgrade. What does subgrade mean? What is what is a tobacco card? What is what is tribute? Tribute. I don't know what tribute is, right? So we created this dictionary in an effort to just create a shared glossary for people who are coming into this space for the first time, might feel overwhelmed, because there certainly is a very distinct language and vocabulary. And then, of course, below that, we have our Collectors MD core terms, content, and resources, words that we use often, explains what the 12-step program is, abstinence, advanced insanity, everything across the board when it comes to recovery. I mean, some of the things that we talked about today, sunk cost fallacy, right? Variable reward loop, urge surfing, like these are all things that we explain in this space. So it's a nice little resource that I don't think gets access to often, but it does exist on our website. You can find it under tools and resources, hobby dictionary at collectorsmd.com, and it's completely free for anybody who wants to check it out.
Amazing.
With that, you called yourself something before, and I want to hear a little bit more about what you meant by it. You called yourself a delusional optimist. Can you explain to us what that means?
I am a delusional optimist, and it's probably part of the reason why I do engage. Again, we've talked about compulsive or just like risk-taking behaviors, but I tend to have the process and the thought process, and it goes back to our keyword of the day. What am I going to say? Resiliency. It's like things. I will find a way. It's not the end. Can work it out. Figure it out. There's light at the end of the tunnel. That comes from just spiritual practice. That comes from family upbringing. I think it's just one of those things that I really, really believe no matter how hard it gets, this life is worth living.
Yeah.
It's worth giving back. It's worth engaging in. And so, I always feel that there's hope, big hope at the end of any really significant life transition, change, or trauma, right? There's a way through. And I really believe in that. So I I say I'm a delusional optimist, but I also need to recognize and realize that some of that delusional optimism is what led me to behave in greater risk taking. And so, I want to be mindful when I say delusional optimist. It's for the greater good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's for the greater good.
You also use an expression, grasp onto one spot of joy when life becomes difficult. Can you explain what that means?
Wait, say that again. Sorry, I couldn't think.
Grasp onto one spot of joy.
Yes, daily. I think it's a fascinating ritual for myself. Some people, that daily spot of joy is my cup of coffee in the morning. So I have one of those little Breville, express, I every morning, that's my ritual. I get up, I make myself a nice cup of coffee. I sit out on the patio, I listen to the birds, and I just ground myself. And that's my daily ritual or practice, right? It's but there's always those one pieces of spots of joy in the day. Just it all comes back to being intentional, whether it's collecting, whether it's relationships, whether it's dating, whatever it is. It's just being intentional and being present. And a lot of times I think that our anxieties get the better of us, and it leads us astray and gets us into some maladaptive coping. So just grasp onto that daily spot of joy. Find something that's worth showing up for that day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, really well said. And how do people keep moving forward when recovery feels overwhelming?
Ooh. When it feels overwhelming, I think I believe it's just the recognition that recovery isn't, and I said this before, it's not about you're never going to struggle again. It's just like figuring out and accepting and committing, and we call that accepting and commitment therapy. That's actually a modality, but just struggling differently, right? We're still going to have our struggles. There's still going to be hard times. But how can we move this towards healthier coping or healthier engagement or healthier, mental spaces, right? I'm not here to say, just have a positive mental attitude. Everything's going to be fine. No, you're going to struggle. It's going to be hard. And it might be something that you struggle with or likely is something that you're going to struggle with for the rest of your life. Because again, the compulsion is the symptom. It's the catalyst. What is the catalyst? Let's get to the root cause, right? And hopefully we can get to the root cause and improve, right? But that doesn't mean that it's going to be fully successfully cured or you're never going to struggle again.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Recovery isn't about perfection. We know that we acknowledge that recovery is not easy. We don't want to discourage people or make them feel like it's so daunting that it's not even worth starting, right? Like a diet or trying to, overcome an obstacle or a goal that seems insurmountable. But that's why we encourage the one day at a time mentality.
Dude, it's so hard.
It's just about continuing to show up, especially during difficult seasons. And the idea of changing our relationship with something forever, again, like that can sound really overwhelming and maybe even impossible. But that's why recovery communities emphasize, again, like just got to show up one at bat, one day, one step at a time. We don't have to play all 9 innings at once. We simply have to focus on the at bat in front of us and make the next right decision. And over time, those small decisions begin to compound and, building the confidence and resilience needed to keep going is what powers us through.
Absolutely. And it's a day-to-day process, sometimes minute to minute, hour by hour. You know what I mean? And so it's just taking it one solitary step at a time. Yeah. One single step at a time.
Yeah.
I know that it sounds so cliche, but I mean, gosh, it's so true.
Yeah. We're going to transition over to our final segment, which is the dopamine economy crisis, this public health crisis that we were alluding to before, and the future of support. So like we were talking about, as it pertains to this public health crisis that many people aren't prepared for, can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing from your perspective as a clinician, as a licensed therapist?
Yeah, I know we're here talking about sports cards and collectibles, but I mean, I think it's just the broader environment that we're all living in, right? There's with smartphones access, the algos, the live streaming, hi, but it's, for the greater good, the live streaming, okay. The infinite scrolling, there's just constant stimulation. So we're finding that these apps are utilizing the same formulas that a lot of the casinos used, and that they're using that formula because it's worked. I don't know. I've seen it before where, you're at a Burger King or some fast food restaurant, and then they have like a slot machine, and then it's like the burgers line up and you're like, what? Like we're here in the fast food line, but that information and that content is everywhere, that constant stimulation.
Yeah.
And other apps and other organizations are catching on to it. You know what I mean? That's why when you do the Robin Hood and you get the confetti and the gamification of everything, I think it's just a broader environment that we're all living in, and we're all trying to figure out, what to do with this new constant dopamine nation, dopamine attention. It's all designed to capture our attention. So maybe your symptom may not be compulsive collecting, but maybe it's, spending exorbitant amounts on Amazon. Right. Or clicking, or you get a notification and you go, ooh, what's this? Or sorry, I'm trying not to use the big names. You could edit that part out, but but you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
yeah, no, it's all good.
You pop, these things pop up. It goes, hey, would you like to buy? Would you like to try? It's very in our face. I don't know if you've ever looked at the amount of notifications you get on your smartphone, but they're hip to it. They know, they understand. Yeah, they know that. If this pops up, hey, you've been scrolling this item. I see your algo says you've been scrolling that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The IP's right here. Like, I'm going to pop this up and give you 10, 15%, off right now. But if you click right now, and that's the thing, it's that constant instant, right? I know you asked me about my social media. I don't have any. Yeah. I had to get off, I had to stop.
Good for you.
Because it was and that's by design. Like, I can do that. I know that there are places and people who need that. That's engagement. That is how, our economy works now, right? It's very digitally based. So I understand that. And I get that's not everybody can do that, but it was just like, it was becoming constant stimulation, frictionless spending.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit more. How have smartphones, the live streaming platforms, the constant access, all of that changed the landscape?
Well, before, if you think about it, especially in regards to the G word, right? Gambling, right? It's like you used to have to physically get into your vehicle. You had to go to a brick and mortar space or place. People had to look you in the eye, right? And say, or maybe they might say, hey, you're back again. You might feel that like, wait, I am back. There was a real connection with that, right? Yep. Now it's as simple as just picking up the phone and going to the app. It's in secrecy. Again,
any time of the day, unlimited access.
Addiction thrives in secrecy. I say it over and again. Addiction thrives in secrecy, and so
it's so much easier to hide.
So much easier to hide, right?
But it's also mindless, right? Like when you have your
phone, frictionless.
24/7, and it's following you everywhere you go, including getting into bed at night. And what do people do when they can't sleep? They doom scroll. They toss and turn. Yeah. So how many people end up on what? Why do you think? I mean, it's not by coincidence that breakers are like what do you like? The hottest time to be live is like in the middle of the night, right? Like, right. At first wondered like why are these breakers first going live at midnight on a Wednesday? Well, because that's most collectors are engaged, right? Like maybe their partner fell asleep and they can't fall asleep themselves. So what do? They go on Whatnot and they're just messing around. They're watching live, and one thing leads to another, and they fall into. And the same thing applies with the gambling apps, right? Like it just has become so incredibly frictionless to the point where you could do it any time of the day, any hour of the day. If I opened up Whatnot right now, I mean, there's hundreds of live streamers as we speak at 1:40 p.m. on a Thursday, right? Like that's just the nature of it. So why do environments built around urgency and stimulation make these compulsive behaviors so difficult? And I'm kind of asking rhetorical questions, I don't know the answer to this, but it's just so great to hear from your perspective, again, as a licensed therapist, explain these things.
And so can you just say that one more time?
Yes. Why do environments built around urgency and stimulation make compulsive behavior so difficult?
Oh my gosh, make it so difficult. I mean, it very much is like working around those urge delays, right? It's like it's constant, it's needed. You gotta do it right now, or you're gonna miss out, right? It's that that constant attention economy right now. And so it just makes it difficult because it's so in your face. It's everywhere. It is a very lively environment. Again, it goes back to connection. So and if you want to repeat the question again, let me give you a little bit. I can give you a little bit more, but just I feel like I'm in a panel interview. Could you one more time, please?
Yeah, one more time. No, I mean, I think you answered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off what you said, I think like creating that urgency, that stimulation, that nonstop access, it's designed to draw you in. It's designed to keep you engaged in these endless cycles. These manufacturers, these platforms, they know exactly what they're doing. They want us
to
be on this hamster wheel indefinitely, right? Like
it's sales 101. If you don't buy now, it might be gone next time you come around.
It's across the board. You get like
somebody else might get it, and they're going to get all your future perceived value that you could have potentially, right. It could have been yours.
It's every industry too. Like empty cart notifications, flash sales on Cyber Monday, with Macy's, right? Like it's everywhere. The urgency, the stimulation, the in your face, nonstop flashing lights, all the gimmicks, they're designed to extract money from your wallet.
But because they work. And before there were specific industries that may have engaged in that type of, content or marketing, but they recognize and realize that it works, right? Yeah. I know a certain purchase site, you get on there, it flashes up at you. We can all probably been on this site. It's just to buy products. But you go in there and it says spin the wheel, and it's kind of the notification keeps popping out at you.
Yeah.
Buy now, get this. Or if you buy this now, you get it for a penny. We all know what site I'm talking about, right? It's like they know that works, right? Yeah. You get your coins if you buy this, and we're gonna give you more coins, and we'll get you cash back. But in reality, it's just designed to get you to spend more. Realistically, there's not going to be a benefit for you, but they know that it works, so they're utilizing it on their platforms.
You know what the silliest thing was when I was deep into my active addiction with traditional gambling is I was a VIP with DraftKings, and I had a VIP host assigned to me, and I would get these brochures where I got to pick out like a gift once a quarter, once a year, whatever it was. And I got to go to events and concerts and games, and they treated me like a high roller, right? And in my mind, I was like, this is amazing. I get to be the guy. I get to take my friends and my wife and my family out to these like incredible lavish events. And at one point I was able to get like a Panerai watch, which is like it's like a $5,000-$6,000 watch. But when you add up all of the things that they throw at you and compare it to the money that you've spent or the money that you lost, it's the equivalent of walking into a car dealership to buy a $50,000 Tesla and being told by the dealer, the car salesman, hey, I know you're about to spend 50 grand, to push it over the edge to get you to buy it. I'm going to give you $100 off.
Right.
What? Like, yeah. Wow,
yeah. If somebody were to tell you that, you look at them crazy, right? But it's but when you're actively engaging in the disordered behavior, it doesn't seem that far.
Exactly. So
it's ego again, mother.
Ego.
Yeah. It's like
ego.
I want to be the person. I want to be the one.
And it all comes with the lifestyle and the identity and the way you want people to perceive you. And I mean, it's all the draw. It's all, And that's why like Vegas and the gambling industry, I mean, even with these commercials, like, you got Jamie Foxx and Selena Gomez and, Rob Gronkowski and like all these superstars that are, ambassadors for these casinos. And, it's like they are showcasing the lifestyle that you could have if you engage, right? Like, it's all facade, it's all presentation, and it's a means to pull you in and make you feel like you're missing out if you don't sign up, right?
Right, yeah.
So I mentioned this before, but what warning signs should collectors and families pay attention to? This is a double-sided question. What warning signs should collectors and families pay attention to, and what concerns you most about the younger generations growing up in the dopamine economy?
Right. Oh my gosh. Hiding purchases. That was the biggest one. Hiding purchases, chasing those losses, spending beyond means, spending beyond limits. Big one, neglecting relationships. Suddenly you don't have time to go golfing with your buddies, right? Or suddenly you don't have time to go to the courts, the pickleball courts or the basketball courts. It's taking up so much of your time, right?
Right.
And the big one, that emotional dependence on the outcome. Once it starts to disrupt your mood or the way you show up for yourself or in relationships or engaging, I mean, that emotional dependence on that outcome of that card or getting a particular card or getting a particular payout, that's a big one. Yeah. If it starts to affect a mood, right, if it's causing disruption and instability there, sleep, the way you eat, the way you sleep, and the way you engage in your community, it's time to take an inward look. Yeah. Sure.
Well said. And what about children?
Oh my gosh. And so is it the how-to key? Oh my gosh, that's so. I mean, it comes with limits, right? I think it's just like limiting as much as we can and as much as possible. I don't want to sound like I jokingly with my friend, we talk about being a Luddite, right? It's just like being like anti-technology, anti all this. I don't want to necessarily go that far, but it does come to limiting their engagement with these platforms, which is really hard to do. I mean, we, as parents, we just there's no broader community right now that really is helping us, with the kiddos, right? So it's becoming harder and harder. That community isn't there nearly as much as it may have been in the past, but it's just trying to find engagement that's for their psychological development and levels, right? That doesn't have to do with getting on these platforms or getting anywhere near these platforms as much as we can help it, right?
Right.
Go outdoors, touch grass, like the kids say, touch grass.
But
really?
touch the right type of grass.
Yeah, touch the right type. Yeah, not the grass.
So how can people enjoy hobbies without losing themselves in them? And I mentioned intentional collecting as our version of harm reduction. It's something we encourage. It's something that I don't believe exists within traditional gambling environments with, gambling addiction. I don't think that harm reduction, and everybody has a different mindset, perspective, philosophy, opinion when it comes to certain vices. But I think collecting has redeeming qualities, right? It's rooted in community, nostalgia, connection. There's a purity to it that can still be salvaged if we strip away all these extra layers. With traditional gambling, there's no redeeming qualities. It's insidious by nature. It destroys from the inside out. I don't think harm reduction is applicable. With that being said, I'll ask the question again. How can people enjoy hobbies without losing themselves in them?
Know that your purchase, already consider it a loss. I mean, again, it goes back to those perceived values. If you can collect and it's not causing hardship or financial hardship or disruption, if it's not causing emotional or mood disorders, if it's not significantly impacting your relationships, right? That's a good sign. If you can make that purchase, right? Again, it always goes back to impairment. right? Is this going to cause a significant social or emotional impairment, right?
Right.
So we just want to be mindful of that, and financial, right? In this case, with collecting, there's a really big financial hardship and financial implications, right?
Right.
So we want to be mindful of that, but just know that whether or not there's a perceived value for it in the future or not, and that is a special beloved piece for you, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with collecting. Again, it just goes back to the parameters of, is this causing a significant social, emotional, or financial hardship, right? How is it impacting those components? And if it's not necessarily affecting those components, then yeah, that could be safe, right? That's a safer or harm reductive way to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, the issue isn't the sports cards. It's not necessarily the technology, and it's certainly not the collecting itself. The challenge is learning how to navigate environments that are intentionally designed, right? Where the systems are set up, engineered to capture our attention, maximize engagement, and just keep us chasing more. Awareness doesn't solve everything, but awareness is often where meaningful change begins.
Right. So, the goal isn't abstinence from enjoyment, right? And the collecting, the goal is intentionality, right? It's being intentional with your purchases.
Absolutely. So, Lauren, we're going to switch over to our rapid fire round.
Oh, God.
I'm going to hit you with a quick hitter. You're going to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. You ready?
Okay.
This is the fun part. Most misunderstood aspect of addiction.
It's not a lack of willpower. It's just, it is a relationship with reward, relief, and escape, right? So I think, it's not just a lack of willpower, right? There's so many other components and pieces that are there.
Absolutely. Biggest warning sign that collecting may be becoming compulsive.
I said it before, when your mood becomes dependent on those outcomes, when your social and emotional becomes dependent on those outcomes, that's one of the bigger warning signs for sure.
One boundary every collector should consider implementing.
A budget, a predetermined budget for yourselves. No buts, no ifs, ands, or buts. Predetermined budget that does not move.
Amen.
Point blank, period.
One habit that protects your recovery today.
Oh, we said it over and over again. Connection.
All right.
And just connecting with people that you trust.
And I got to finish these sentences. Collecting becomes unhealthy when blank.
It starts costing you more than just the money, right? When it starts costing you family, relationships, bonds. Yeah.
And finish this sentence. Healing begins when blank.
Healing begins when you stop managing the struggle alone.
It all ties back to community.
All times back. Community, Lauren, the big C. Bigger, better C. Sorry.
So I think the three biggest takeaways from today, as far as words in recovery: resilience, accountability, community. And you see it on the screen: support, accountability, change. More or less,
Oh, yeah. There you go. So you got it. You know what's up. You understand it.
Lauren, this was such an insightful conversation. What I appreciate most about your story is that it reminds us that addiction and compulsive behaviors rarely look the way we expect them to. They can affect clinicians, veterans, entrepreneurs, parents, and people who appear to have everything together on the surface. Your willingness to share both your struggles and your recovery serves as an important reminder that seeking help isn't weakness, it's courage. Perhaps the most important thing is that your story reinforces something we often say at Collectors MD. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through connection, vulnerability, accountability, and the willingness to keep showing up for ourselves and for one another. For those listening, you can learn more about Lauren and her work through Ascent Wellness Group. And if you're in Colorado and looking for support, we've included her Psychology Today profile and contact information in the description below. If this conversation resonated with you, Collectors MD is here as a free resource. We host free weekly peer support meetings every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern and a Thursday meeting from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern in partnership with the Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado called Unboxed, powered by Collectors MD. You can find all of our educational content, tools, resources, and support offerings at collectorsmd.com. Be sure to subscribe to Collectors MD on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all major streaming platforms to view and listen to the Collectors Compass, as well as our other two shows, Behind the Breaks and Collectors MD Features. A huge thanks to All Touch Case for sponsoring the show. Make sure to check out their products at alltouchcase.com and make sure to use code CollectorsMD for 15% off your order. Finally, if you'd like to support our mission and help us continue expanding peer support, educational resources, outreach initiatives, and scholarship opportunities through the CMD Foundation, which just launched last Friday. You can learn more and make a tax-deductible donation by visiting our landing page on the LOHAS website. Link is in the description below. I'm Alyx Efron. This is the Collector's Compass, reminding you to collect with intention, not compulsion. We'll see you next time.